This decision has caused an uproar in the Eastern Cape. It has been taken in a bid to manage the spread of the virus in these provinces. The combined number of positive cases in both provinces is over 14,000. The joint number of deaths is close to 300.
That the more people get infected in Western Cape and die, the more some of them are being buried in this province. So the traffic that we've been observing between the two provinces is also more.
The decision has been met with contempt by traditionalists.
The decision to bury those people from the Eastern Cape who have died of COVID-19 in the Western Cape is very insensitive, immature, and the Premier is ill-informed. The Eastern Cape Premier, we must also understand, is the temporal political head of the province and not the head of the Eastern Cape customs and traditions.
Employment and the movement of seasonal workers between the two provinces will also be looked at. This will include the management of travel between the two provinces when the schools reopen. Yanga Funani, SABC News in the Eastern Cape.
Now, as you heard there, the agreement by both the Eastern and Western Cape governments to restrict the travel of bodies of people who died from COVID-19 from one province to the other has been met by contempt by traditionalists. On the line, I'm joined by President of the Congress of Traditional Leaders of South Africa, Kgosi Mathupa Mokoena. Kgosi, welcome to SABC News Channel. I guess the first question is, how has COVID-19 changed the way funerals are conducted in South Africa with regards to the customs of traditions?
Thanks very much for having me. The coronavirus caught all of us by surprise, and at some point we'll do unthinkable and abnormal things. And as Congress of Traditional Leaders say, we are saying this is really unconstitutional. We are dealing with people who are so bereaved, who want to bury their dead with dignity. And they were talking of a ritual that had to be performed before someone can be buried, even after having buried. And for stopping people to transport their corpse or their dead to their provinces or to their resting place is really unthinkable, and it's just unacceptable. As Contralesa, we are saying the two provinces must go and sit down and think about this thoroughly, because it's not on. There's no way we can accept that if someone passed on in the Western Cape while he's staying at Lusikisik, they must not go there. You must know, my leader, that there are kids who are, when their family member passed on, let's assume that kid is still 3 years, 4 years. He does not know this person. Now, after some years, when he's a grown-up someone, he might want to see the grave of that family member. I mean, you expect this person to pay money from all the way from Lusikisiki to the Western Cape to go and perform rituals in that grave. It's not on. We cannot accept this, really.
I think then the question would be, Kgosi, is possibly the understanding of what tradition means to other people than others, or Western civilization and Africans, because that's basically what you're speaking of, because undoubtedly the pandemic of COVID-19 makes it difficult to cross-border travel between provinces because of infections. Is there no give and take at this point in time, and possibly later get repatriation when things do subside?
We agree. The give and take is that we can compromise to say if someone passed on, what they can do is that this corpse must not sleep in their home, direct from the mortuary to the graveyard. That we can compromise. And we can agree that let's limit the number of those who are going to transport this corpse from that mortuary to her or his place. That would be a compromise that we can do. Because usually the corpse had to sleep at his or her home before he or she is buried the following day. But that is a compromise that we can tolerate. But not to say completely no one must cross the border, it cannot be buried somewhere else. That one I can tell you, my leader. It will not take off, and we can challenge that in courts. They're not going to win it. They know it. Hence, we are saying as Contralesa, We're aware that we're dealing with something very unusual this time. But we are saying to our provinces, please go and review your decision and those agreements. Let's sit down and talk about this thing and look at the best method that we can do. On the other hand, preventing the spread of this virus. On the other hand, let's respect the culture and tradition, even the rituals of us as people in South Africa. Let's not allow the Western culture to dominate our being as South Africans. That's the reason why I was saying sometimes it's so disturbing that the Roman Dutch law will be considered as the law in South Africa, disregarding our customary law. It's so unfortunate in this black continent, in this democratic country, a black government for that matter.
The question that I'd like to ask you, Kgosi, is the fact that when this was the meeting between the two provinces with regards to the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape was held in consultation, as we heard there, with the other ministry. Did you not have a say? Were you not part of those consultations? Because you're obviously very much against what has been decided.
This is what we're fighting about in South Africa, in our country. Traditional leadership were here even before these governments came into being. But unfortunately, we are being disregarded now. There are traditional leaders in the Western Cape. There are traditional leaders in the Eastern Cape. There are structures of traditional leadership in the Eastern Cape, for example, the House of Traditional Leaders. We have Contra-Lesa in the Eastern Cape. They were not consulted when these decisions were arrived at. The question is why? There are ways the majority of those people who will be transported from the Western Cape to the Eastern Cape are staying in rural areas, in the areas that are under traditional leadership. Now, it's so embarrassing that our respected leaders in both provinces will take such a decision without consulting the traditional leadership, who are so important in making sure that those cultures, tradition, and rituals are performed in terms of our own cultures.
Where to from here, as we stand? Obviously, you'd like to get this done as soon as possible. You'd hate to have a situation where a bereaved family, is transporting a loved one from the Eastern Cape to Cape Town or vice versa. They're stopped and they are arrested. How do we get this sorted out and fast-tracked? Because as you said, you'd rather go straight up to Concord, the Constitutional Court, or the courts to get this sorted out.
In fact, there's still room for the two provinces to rethink and review their stance. What we're going to do through our chairperson of Contra-Lesa in the Eastern Cape and even the Western Cape, will demand a meeting of the two provinces with our structure. As national leadership, we're prepared to go down as well to part of those meetings, because there's no way we'll accept our culture to be diluted as easily as this. Unfortunately, it is done by the people we trust so much in terms of leadership. I'm disappointed with the leadership in the Eastern Cape, because those are the people who understand our culture and tradition. But as I'm saying, there is still room for us to reach amicable arrangement other than going to court. Because unfortunately, if they can't take what we're saying, we're left with no choice but to go to court.
Kgosi Mathupa Mokoena, President of Contra-Lesa, thank you indeed for joining us right here on SABC News Channel. The Contra-Lesa President is speaking to us on the subsequent agreement by the Eastern and West Cape governments to restrict travel of bodies, repatriation of bodies between the two provinces of people who have died due to COVID-19. And you hear there a lot of people. Contempt is what it was received by Contra-Lesa with that regards.